Welcome to Yard Buzz. Yard Buzz is a Robert Jans Media Center production brought to you by the Idaho Department of Correction. Today we have special guest, Joe Howell. Welcome to Yard Buzz, fellas. My name is Lawrence. Everybody know me as L.
And I'm Kim Wardwell. I'm part of the education staff.
Today we got a special guest here to y'all, man. Mr. Joe Howell. He's our special guest. He's gonna tell you a lot of information, give you a lot of things to pay attention to. And Joe, he's been here before, so tell us about RDU.
Hey, thanks for having me on here today. I found myself back in here after the third time. It was September 2006. And I found myself in RDU, and I was noticing a lot of older people here in the facilities, you know, in their 50s and 60s, and it seemed like a high school reunion. Everyone knew everyone, and I started to feel a little uncomfortable because I'd been here 3 times, and people were starting to know me. And it was right then that I realized that this wasn't my life. I couldn't do this anymore. You know, I saw those older guys, and I saw that if I continued doing what I was doing, I was going to be in here in my 50s and 60s and not have any chance at any life or retirement or anything, really. It was right then I just decided I'm not good at committing crimes. Clearly, we're not. We'd get busted, right? So I had to choose a new career path.
Well, tell us about that.
So when I got my felony in 1999, I was doing telemarketing, selling tools over the phone. And I'd stuck with it throughout, you know, all my vacations from coming to prison. And I got out and I stuck with it, and I opened an office for Ace Industrial February 4th, 2008. Wow. And I hired, my first 6 employees were work release guys. So it was from a Topper Center that the Department of Corrections contracted with the Ada County Jail. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they would stay at the Ada County Jail Work Release Center, and they would come to work every day. And I had those employees, the first 6 came from there, and they didn't know that I was on parole, like the staff there. Mm-hmm. And after about 3 months, they realized I was on parole, and they freaked out. They thought it was a bad thing that I was supervising inmates. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was 2008, there were no jobs. I called their bluff and I said, all right, well, I'll send all of your guys back. Good luck finding them work. And the employment coordinator said, wait a second here. And they made that concession that I was allowed to supervise their guys moving forward from that day.
Nice. And that's a misconception that a lot of people don't have. Sometimes they think that because we've been in these walls that, you know, we can't figure it out. You know what I mean? And just explain to everyone like how that misconception is just false.
Well, I don't know. You know, there's so many misconceptions out there. You know, criminal records and, you know, college. If you don't go to college, you'll never have anything. You know, all of that. Mm-hmm. But it's just a matter of determination. You know, we all will get opportunities, right? Right. And you've got to find that right company and get in on the ground floor, mm-hmm. and make sure it's a company with enough potential for growth, you know, that you can end up at your ultimate goal, right? Mm-hmm. You can't go to that company that maybe they stop at $15 an hour. You've got to find that one that stops at 25 or 40 or whatever you want to make. Right, sure. And work your way up from the bottom.
Sure. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your mind frame. How did you get to where you are today from coming in here 3 times and figuring it out, and how did that progression go for you?
Well, so I got out, when did I get out? I gotta think about this. I got out April 2007. Okay. And I don't know, it was real easy. You know, parole, they give you a list of rules, and if you follow them, you don't go back to prison. So I just followed the rules. Mm-hmm. You know, I was never scared before when I was on probation, because when you violated, you can always post bond and get right out. And get your affairs in order. Right. But when you're on parole, you know, you violate, there's no pass and go, there's no getting your affairs in order. Mm-hmm. You just lose everything that you have sitting out there. Mm-hmm. So I was really scared on parole. I followed all the rules, and I did 3.5 years of good parole. And I attribute that to a lot of my success. Mm-hmm. For that 3.5 years, I was 100% sober, no alcohol, no drugs, no anything. Mm-hmm. and it allowed me to build a life for myself that I'm not willing to give back. I wouldn't give it back for anything.
Right.
You know, within that 3.5 years, you know, I'd gotten married, I owned a house, I owned a boat. You know, I had things going on in my life, and I was making a good income, and there was just no drug or anything worth giving it back for.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
Joe, you're here as our guest today more than just to tell your story as how you can make it once you're out of prison. You also have a focus, a heart for the inmates. So why don't you tell the people why you're here as far as what you have to offer, as to what they that could help them as far as when they get ready to get out.
Okay, so currently, you know, we're still hiring at Ace Industrial Supply, and you know, I hire a lot of people that are coming out of facilities, and we pay $15 an hour or commission, whichever's more. So my salespeople, you know, they really get a good footing, and they get to make good money. After, you know, you get really good at the job, I have people making, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a week.
Nice.
You know, real life-changing money.
Nice.
I've got a guy, he's been working for me for about 2 years. He's been out for about 2.5 years. And I just looked at his payroll right before I came in here, and it was $2,100 for 1 week.
Fantastic.
And that's like an average week for him.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, one of us that he got out and, you know, put his nose to the grindstone and is doing what he's got to do, and he's making a good living.
So let me ask you this. So for the guys in here that, you know, they may be coming up on their time to go home, and they're trying to wrap their head around this thing. They're trying to figure out, you know, what's my next step? What do I need to do to position myself to succeed? What kind of advice would you give them? So say if a guy, he's not topping and he's getting out on parole, and, you know, it took you a couple times and you had to figure something out, and, you know, all of a sudden it clicked for you. So how could we help a guy in here kind of know what to look for, know what to think about as his time comes to re-enter society?
Like as in regards to like work or housing or?
Let's both.
Well, I think
we talked about the employment thing a little bit. So
yeah.
So say a guy, say his parole date is coming up, and they want him to get out and go to a halfway house.
Okay.
So what would be some things that he should be processing in his mind to set himself up for success?
So let me jump in for just a second. So we can clarify, Lawrence is talking about both employment as well as housing, because part of the story that we want Joe to talk about also regards as to what he's doing with housing. So there's actually two elements to this. So now I'll step back and let you continue on.
Well, I think in regards to housing, it's really important. You know, if you're going to choose a housing provider, you need to ask some very important questions. You know, how many people per room? You know, a lot of these housing providers are putting, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 people per room. And, you know, with COVID and all the extra releases coming out of facilities, they're putting bunk beds in a lot of rooms.
Wow.
And, you know, those guys moving in there, they have to pay $450 for a bunk bed, for a space smaller than the cell they just got out of.
All of a sudden, you're going from having 1 cellie to 3 cellies.
Yeah, so you always want to ask, you know, how many people per room, and do you offer single room housing? Right. Another good question is, what types of offenders do you rent to? You know, if you're uncomfortable around certain types of offenders, you know, you may want to ask those questions so that you're not housed with them.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the things that are important as far as seeking housing, like as opposed to choosing just any random home or any random halfway house. What are some things that could contribute to our success as we re-enter and go to a halfway house?
Well, I think it's really important to find a place that has a little bit of structure for when you first get out, because we've thrived under structure. We've proven that we can do that, right?
Right.
And that's why they've decided to, you know, let people out, is because we've done well in this structure. So I think if you found a place with a little bit of structure for the very beginning, just to help you kind of transition, but I feel like a lot of them are too structured, and you've got to move on and broaden your wings.
Right.
So you're kind of taking the assumption, the position that a guy getting ready to get out could actually have more than one choice. I kind of get the impression that some guys go into it desperate to take the first spot they can, as if they wouldn't even be able to have that choice. And you act as if a person has some power to be able to choose what kind of housing or what kind of job they take.
Well, absolutely. You know, Department of Corrections, you know, if they say that they would like you to go to a halfway house, they don't tell you which halfway house you have to go to. They don't tell you which provider you have to rent from. You know, that's your choice to choose where you're going to live. Right. So it's important to ask the right questions so you make the right choice.
So how do you avoid that temptation to just grab that first one that comes along? Do you put someone on hold or say, let me check, see if there's something better? I mean, how would you handle something like that?
Well, it's just like job hunting, right? You know, you're going to put in a bunch of applications, you're going to see what you get back, and then you're going to take a little bit of time. You know, they don't expect an immediate answer. You're incarcerated. You know, I mean, it could take a couple of weeks for you to respond.
Especially with snail mail.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you wait until you get, you know, all your responses back in, and you find the right option that's going to work best for you.
So let's double back to employment really quick.
Yeah.
If we're, you know, say a guy has been here and he's done X amount of years and, you know, he's nervous. He doesn't really know what he wants to do yet, and he knows he wants to succeed. That's pretty much all he knows, is that he doesn't want to be in prison anymore. He doesn't want to ever do this experience again. What would you say to this guy? Like, he's entering the world after being away for so long, and he's got this entry-level position at some company, and he knows he wants more, right? What should his mind frame be?
Well, to do the best job you can at that entry-level job, you know, to work towards a promotion, right? And always keep your eyes out for other opportunity, right? I'm not a big advocate of jumping from job to job to job because you're going to make $1.50 more at each one, right? I mean, to really, I think, get anywhere, you have to stick it out with a company and show some loyalty and some grit, work through the hard times with them.
Sure. And the reason I'm asking this question is because, I mean, I'm putting myself in someone's shoes. I'm not there yet, but I'm putting myself there as if I was there. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do?
Well, the first thing you're going to ask an employer to give you an opportunity, right?
Right, sure.
And you know, you're going to be grateful for that opportunity.
Absolutely.
And you're going to, you know, work as hard as you can for that guy or whoever it is that you're working for, right? And you're going to give it your best in hopes that he sees that your value is more than what you're being paid and you're capable of doing much more than he's giving you, right?
Absolutely.
And you worked your way up until, you know, maybe you're into management or running a crew, depending on what you go into. And then hopefully then you're making, you know, good life-changing money. And, you know, I always encourage you to invest in yourself.
So in other words, you started out at one point coming out of prison on parole where you're working for someone else. And at some point you transitioned into your own boss.
Well, and I still do work for someone else.
Okay. Because I'm going to guess that a lot of parole officers are, if you say, I'm going to be self-employed, are going to say, no, that's fantasy thinking. So how do you make it real as far as moving more and more out on your own?
I don't know. It was weird when I got out on parole. You know, I'd already sold tools for a lot of years when I got out the last time. And I was pretty good at what I do.
So you were moving back to familiar territory.
Yeah, you know, it was quick money for me.
Okay.
You know, I could make $1,000 or $2,000 in a week. You know, when you get out of prison with absolutely nothing, that's very appealing. You know, I needed to get a car and I needed clothes. You know, I got out with blues and a t-shirt that was once white when I bought it off commissary. You know, so I went right back to it. And I remember the first month I went in and I saw my probation officer. And, you know, you fill out the monthly report and your earnings and whatnot. And I turned that into her and she told me that I was full of shit and that people on parole don't make that kind of money their first month out. And I had to go home and get check stubs and provide all this verification. And I don't know, it was
She thought it was a con.
yeah, no, it was a wild ride, you know. I thought she was going to make me stop what I do for a living, and I was worried I was going to have to get, you know, an $8 an hour job.
So at what point did you know that you could start moving out more on your own?
Well, so when I got out, I was working out of my basement, calling contractors, selling tools out of my house, and That sounds glamorous, working from home, but it's terrible. You know, I was socially starved. You know, I would go to my competitors' tool offices just to go hang out with people and talk to people about what we do, you know. And I don't know, it was probably December, but I called the company Ace Industrial that ships all of our tools, and I said, hey, I can't do this out of my house anymore. We have to do something here. We have to open an office. And I talked to the owner, and he told me no. So I went to the vice president, and I go, what am I going to do here? I can't keep doing this out of my house. And he made me write out a business proposal and all kinds of stuff. And I sent it to him, and he proofread it and fixed it for me. And then I took a second run at it, and I got a yes.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that pursue, know what you want, set your mind to it, and go after it.
Yeah, you can't ever give up.
Right.
Just because you get told no, that doesn't really mean no. It just means not right now.
Not yet.
You're not
but it
there
can
yet.
Be done.
Yeah.
But it also means write a clear business plan so that you're not just throwing money away.
Absolutely. You have to have a good plan moving forward. And you have to look, you know, 6 months and 2 years down the road. You know, what's it going to be, you know?
So you, along those same lines, you were starting out with sales, and then you started hiring others to do sales. So you're kind of developing a hierarchy, a structure. But then you ventured out into housing, and again, as far as having a plan. Why did you even want to move into housing? What was your motive?
It was an accident. You know, I hire all of these people from work release centers, and these guys were telling me about, you know, how bad the halfway houses were. And I kept seeing this house around the corner from my office. It was a piece of crap, you know. It was pretty run down, and it had a parking lot all the way around it, which was appealing to me, you know, because I'd never be mad at them for not mowing the lawn, right? So I bought this. It was a residence that had a conditional use permit to be used as a business, but once it's repurchased, it had to go back to residential. So I bought it for $125,000. That would be a dream today, buy any house for $125,000. And I put every dollar I had into it. It cost me about $16,000 to turn it back into a house, and it was a 5-bedroom, 2-bath house. I still own it today, and my phone wouldn't quit ringing because I offered single room.
Wow.
And, you know,
Speak to that.
well, you get your own bedroom in my houses. You know, so I take care of all the utilities, and I remodel all the houses. I make them brand new. And I do hard flooring, you know, hardwood floors all throughout. That way you don't get that bad smell you get in rentals with carpet.
Right.
I put carpet on the stairs for noise so you don't have to hear the people going up and down the stairs, but that's it.
Nice.
But it's single room. I pay for all the utilities. You know, I own a small construction company that handles all the maintenance on my properties, so they're all well maintained. And I take care of pest control, lawn care, everything at all of my properties is all taken care of. So they just pay $500 a month, and they get Wi-Fi and all their utilities.
So you're basically then showing that it can be done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, that first house, my phone wouldn't quit ringing, and shortly after I bought another house, and it's a 5-bedroom, and it has a studio apartment kind of off to the side that it came with. And the first tenant I ever rented to in 2015, he still rents from me to this day, and he lives in my studio apartment.
So that ties in with what you had said earlier as far as questions to ask. How many people do you house? It's just not automatic that every place has 4 or 5 people in a room. You've shown that it can be done with one.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, you now have more than one house?
Yeah, I have 5 houses now, the total of 37 rooms, and I'm really close to closing on another one here in about 40 days, and I think there's going to be 12 bedrooms there.
Wow. Okay. So what the people that are watching this, the inmates here at the yard, what can they get from this to see that they too could be successful? First step, I think, would be how to get out there and get established for parole. So if you were back in prison, knowing what you know now, and you were getting yourself set up for going out, what kind of questions or what things would you be looking for? You're not going to automatically just take the first house you come to. You're going to, you have something in your mind as to, it's not going to be perfect, so you got to know when to compromise, but you also know when to hold out till the thing is good enough. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I'll tell you, you've just got to make a decision, right? And
Well, what do you mean?
you have to look at all the options. And when we're incarcerated, we make all these great plans, right? Like when I get out, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna go to the gym every morning before work because I get up early now. And I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna cook myself breakfast. And we make all these plans and we plan our days out. We dream about these days. And then we get out and life happens. And I don't have the time to get up in the morning and go to the gym every morning. And I don't have time to make myself that bacon and eggs that I dreamed that I was gonna do every day. So we have to be able to adapt and change. We can't get our plans set so solid that if something doesn't go right, that it sends us into a tailspin. And I do see that with a lot of people that come out. Their plan is so set, and the slightest thing derails them, and they're back in here again.
Yeah. So flexibility is a key point then.
Absolutely.
But you also have to be determined that this is the direction I'm going. The details may change, but I'm still going in this direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about backsliding? You've been out for what now, 15, 16 years?
14 years.
14 years.
April was 14 years.
So how do you keep from the backsliding?
I'm not perfect. I'm not going to say that I haven't backslid. So I've been out.
Well, but you have managed not to come back in here.
Yeah. I've had my run-ins. I had a DUI in 2014.
Okay.
And, at that point in my life, I make a pretty good living, and I thought I was above the law. I thought I could buy my way out of everything. And fortunately, Ada County Jail showed me really quickly that it didn't matter how much money you had, you will ultimately pay the price for making bad decisions.
We even had a governor a few years back that got a DUI. So
Butch Otter.
Yeah.
I remember that defense. He said that his chewing tobacco was dry, so he had a little bit of whiskey to that chewing tobacco, and that's why he blew over the limit. I remember that from when I was a kid.
Damn it, I can't use the whiskey and the chew defense now.
Speaking of whiskey, I watched Joe Rogan before I came here, right? I wanted to be really prepared for this, and I was expecting a nice glass of whiskey. I was a little bit intimidated by the marijuana, but I thought if I had to do it for the sake of the podcast, I would.
There are rumors that the only reason we have a horticulture program is so we can get the marijuana in there. And I want to say that that is absolutely not true. You're going to have to get marijuana somewhere else, but you're not getting it from us.
All right.
All right, well, thank everybody for watching. I hope you gained some nice information here. And like Joe said, just stay focused. Know your direction, pursue it, and be flexible, but don't let it out of your sights. And thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.